Hello, my name is Tamara Goldbogen, and I am with the Arts Learning Collaborative, where we support high-quality arts learning experiences at Weber State University and across the state of Utah. In this video, Erin Roundy is going to walk you through some easy steps for completing a visual arts project. You can check out our website at weber.edu/artslearning, where you can find more videos like these and other resources to help you bring the arts into your classroom. Please feel free to share this with your friends and colleagues.
Welcome. Our lesson today is titled Stencil Art. The objective of this lesson is to explore the relationship between image and text using stencils, with the final product being something like this, a t-shirt design. You will need the following to complete this project: assorted stencils of images and text, which includes letters, numbers, and words, foam wedges, assorted colored ink pads, paper, a writing utensil, and I would suggest to protect the surface with a table covering like newspaper, a big sheet of paper, or newsprint, as the ink can stain. Be sure to check out the description below for a full list of materials. Before we get started, let's first go over the important vocabulary words that you need to know: composition, focal point, proportion, overlapping, and balance. Composition refers to the organization, arrangement, and combination of elements within the borders of a pictorial space. You want to bring the eyes of the viewer toward your center of interest within an aesthetically pleasing composition. And even though you have total creative freedom regarding how you arrange the elements within your work, and the possibilities are endless, there are some things to consider to help you create the best composition to convey your message to the viewer. This painting by Basquiat, titled Bird of Money, shows us what a good composition looks like. Though at first glance the painting looks haphazard and chaotic, Basquiat has intentionally placed elements, such as repetition of shapes, his choice of colors, and his variations of text and image, to create a unified, aesthetically pleasing composition. Focal point is a primary center of interest or focus in a design. A design becomes much more interesting when it has a focal point, a specific area where you want your viewer to focus the majority of their attention when looking at your design. In this example by Banksy, Girl with Balloon, you can see here that the focal point is the red heart, as it contrasts against the gray of the building, as well as the black and white stencil image that he has created here. Proportion is the feeling of unity created when all elements, sizes, amounts, or number relate well with each other. In this example by Shepard Fairey, Make Art Not War, a screen print, you can see that he has done a really good job playing with proportion in terms of numbers. He repeats the circular shape over and over again with the woman's face, with the flowers in her hair, with the image that encircles her, the way that the text itself encompasses the design, and he has used certain numbers of circular shapes to create a sense of proportion in it. Overlapping. Overlapping is breaking up the elements in your design into foreground, middle ground, and background space by overlapping or layering elements. Overlapping elements, or placing some elements over or in front of others, unifies a design and gives it a sense of depth on a flat surface. You can see in this example by Jan Hayworth, SLC Pepper Mural, that Jan uses a lot of overlapping as she composes all these figures into the space, particularly pointing out the four main figures in the center that are located or overlapping everybody else, bringing them to the forefront, making the most important part of the design. Balance. Balance is the distribution of visual weight of the elements in your design within the pictorial space. If the design was a scale, these elements should be balanced to make a design feel stable. In symmetrical balance, the elements used on one side of the design are similar to those on the other side. In asymmetrical balance, the sides are different, but still look balanced. And in radial balance, the elements are arranged around a central point and may be similar. In this example by Trent Call, Jazz Anniversary Mural, he creates a sense of balance by bringing your focal point to the center with You Gotta Love It Baby, and balancing out the sides with about an equal amount of imagery and text. Keeping these things in mind, let's get started. First, I want you to imagine that you've been asked to create a design that will be printed onto a t-shirt. The design needs to include an image, some text, and convey a message. The message can be something funny or serious, obvious or subtle, direct or thoughtful. It's totally up to you, but you want to make sure that both the image and the text support one another. As human beings, we typically recognize and or respond to images before we read any words associated with those pictures. So let's first choose an image. Look through your pile of stencils and select one image to work with. I've chosen to work with this tree stencil. Since the objective of this lesson is to explore the relationship between image and text, I need to decide what the text will be. I want to share with you a brainstorming activity that I use all the time to help me come up with ideas or concepts for various projects, but it can also work to help you generate a list of potential texts that you can use with your t-shirt design. You will need a piece of paper, a writing utensil, and a timer. At the top of the paper, write down what your image is. For the next 2 minutes, I want you to focus your attention solely on what your image is and write down anything that comes to mind related to your image. Think about words that describe your image, its characteristics, its uses or purposes, and don't forget to think about what your image represents or symbolizes. And even if a word comes to mind that doesn't exactly feel like it relates, write it down. Don't erase, don't cross out, just keep your hand moving until the 2 minutes are over. Once you've generated your list, read through it and circle anything that stands out to you. Can you find connections between words, connections between a particular word and your image? Can you combine words to create a phrase? Do any of these words help you think of other new words associated with your image? As I look at my list, I've circled various words across that stand out to me. But I feel like, as I'm looking at them, that I want to go with a statement of rise up. So I'm putting stars by them. When you've decided on the text you want to use in conjunction with your image, you are ready to explore how your text and image visually work together. But before I get started, let me first show you how to use the stencils. Stencils are fun to use because they allow you to visualize before committing to anything, and you can generate a handful of design options quickly and efficiently. They are also flexible, reusable, and reversible. Let's first start talking about how to apply the ink to the stencil. First, lay your stencil on top of the paper. If you're concerned about it moving as you're working with it, you can always put a small piece of tape to hold it in place. But for the most part, using your hands will just keep it in place as you work. Take one of your foam wedges and choose a color. You're going to press it against the ink pad in this kind of a motion so that the foam will absorb some of the ink. It's always a good idea too, when you are not using your ink, to make sure you put the lid back on so it doesn't dry out. I started with a light green because it's best to work light to dark. You can always put more ink on, but you can't take away. So now that I have ink on this, I'm going to gently press against the areas in which I want the color to go. This back and forth, up and down motion allows you to spread the ink around and gives you some control over where you want it to be placed. Even though the foam wedge will absorb the ink, it does dry kind of quickly. So if you're finding as you're going along that the ink is less and less, go ahead and ink it back up in the same way that I showed you, by pressing it gently against the ink pad to transfer ink to the wedge. You can see that I'm using my hand here to hold it in place so it doesn't shift around. This up and down motion also helps with it not moving around. If you were to go like this, that might shift the stencil and also catch some of the ink up underneath. The nice thing about using the ink pads is that they do dry quickly, so it allows you to layer with some ease. I want my tree to go from light to dark. Since I'm using the phrase rise up, I want to also show visually color rising up. So I've applied a darker green and I'm going to add it to the areas, also going up into the lighter green to mix those colors together to kind of give it a gradation effect. If you want to monitor how things are going, if you hold down your stencil, you can lift up a corner so you can see how things are looking, and then gently lay it back down and continue if you feel like you need to. Another suggestion I would make is with the foam wedges, you can tell that I've used green on this one, whereas this one has brown, kind of yellows and reds here. Though it's not very important that you keep your colors separated, I do recommend that you use foam wedges that are in ink pads that are of similar colors. Another thing about using stencils with ink pads, not only can you layer, but we're creating color mixing as well. Because depending on how much pressure you place as you're applying the ink to the surface, you can control kind of light scattering. So I can come in here with the brown and kind of just to do a light scattering to give some dark values to my tree, and it won't cover it completely up. So let me show you. You can see that I have layered the colors to give it this nice kind of deeper green down here below. You can also use any other part of the foam wedge. If you really want to get some small details, you can just ink up a little corner and go in as well. You will notice that your hands will get ink over them, but don't worry, wash up with soap and water and you should just be fine. I feel like I'm done with the base of my tree. There you can see it. And again, keep in mind, if I pull away my stencil and I realize there are certain areas I want to work more on, I can easily bring back my stencil, line it up, and continue. Again, like I mentioned earlier, stencils are very flexible to use. All right, another thing that you can do with your stencils is you can outline. So a couple ways to do this are you can line it back up by taking a pen. You can actually come in and trace the shapes that make up your image. With using the ink pads, like I mentioned earlier, they dry quickly, so you don't have to wait for them to dry. You can do this quite quickly after the fact. Depending on the details of your stencil, you can use a variety of different utensils to do this. It doesn't have to be a black pen, it could be a Sharpie, it could be a colored marker. It just depends on how big the openings are to allow the width of your writing utensil in that space. So you can do something like outline. Another great thing about stencils is that you can repeat over and over again. It allows you to place it anywhere you want, so you can repeat your image over and over again. Not that my tree image, it's pretty symmetrical, but if it was an asymmetrical image, I could even flip it and use the other side. Don't forget too that this allows you to overlap on top, so I can lay things on top and then proceed to fill in my stencil with ink going across. So there's a lot of versatility and options that you can do with stencils. All right, now it's time to start exploring composition. Grab 5 sheets of paper, your image stencil, and then select an alphabet stencil you'd like to work with. I want you to pretend that the sheets of paper are the size of the front of the t-shirt where your design will be printed. Knowing that this is the pictorial space in which you have to compose your design, you can then play around with various layouts. Remembering that focal point, proportion, overlapping, and balance can help you achieve a good composition. I'm going to come up with 5 different designs and then share with you my results as I decide which one I feel is the best for my t-shirt design. Okay, I'm done with my 5 designs. Let me show them to you. Here's this. I decided that this is the best of my 5 designs that I worked on. I think we now should review to see how I applied the important vocabulary words that I talked about at the beginning to create a good composition. Let's first start with focal point. I created a focal point by putting the tree and the text directly in the center. Now, I'll admit this is the most obvious and easiest way to create a sense of emphasis or focal point in any kind of design. I chose specifically to do this for the reason that I want to really bring in attention directly to the tree and then surround it with the text below and above it. Second, proportion is about size. Here, I obviously have a tree that is a lot bigger than my text. Overlapping, I decided to take the word rise and place it over the top of the tree to bring it forward in the pictorial space. And then I allowed the text of up to stay up above, clean and free of any kind of confusion or any kind of distraction. And then there is balance. Here in balance, what I did is the fact that I have 3 different elements, the word up, the tree, and rise. I've already created a sense of visual balance because I used an odd number of elements. Using even number of elements is totally fine, but you'll find if you use odd numbers of things, you'll create a sense of balance almost automatically. I'm excited to see my design on the front of a t-shirt. I thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoy making your very own Stencil Art t-shirt design. Now go and create.